dear friends, and we invite our next speaker. It's Mr. Sergei Pavlovich Roshchupkin, Doctor of Physical and Mathematical Sciences, Professor of the Higher School of Fundamental Physical Research of Peter the Great and Petersburg Polytechnic University in Russia.
Сергей Павлович родился на Украине.
Mr. Roshchupkin was born in Ukraine in 1977. He graduated from the Faculty of Experimental and Theoretical Physics in the Moscow Engineering Physics Institute. In 1983, he finished the postgraduate studies at the Department of Theoretical Nuclear Physics of the same institute. He worked at the Federal Nuclear Center of Russia, Sumy, State University, the Institute of Applied Physics of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, where he headed the Department of Quantum Electrodynamics of Strong Fields. Since 2015, professor of the Department of Theoretical Physics of the Peter the Great St. Petersburg Polytechnic University. Mr. Roshchupkin is author and co-author of more than 230 scientific papers in the field of interaction between laser radiation and matter. In the 90s of the 20th century, he began to actively study the works of H.P. Blavatsky, Elena Rerich, Daniel Andreev, Uspensky, Gurdjieff, etc. Working at Sumy State University, he conducts a series of lectures on the materials of the sacred doctrine by HPB. Mr. Roshchupkin speaks at conferences and publishes papers on integration of modern quantum physics and esoteric ideas set forth in the works of H.P. Blavatsky. He has more than 10 articles on this topic, among them quantum physics and esoteric principles, the solar system, modern scientific and esoteric ideas, forced and spontaneous expression of life, the seventh universal principle and its differentiation, fundamental laws of the world, etc. Honored worker of science and technology, Doctor of Physical and Mathematical Sciences, Professor, Higher School of Fundamental Physical Studies of St. Petersburg Polytechnic University, named after Peter the Great. Mr. Roshchupkin with his report, The Riddle of Light, Science and Theosophy.
Hello, good afternoon, dear colleagues. Today I would like to discuss with you maybe one of the most mysterious and mystic concepts that impregnate all the theosophical being is the nature of light. In the sacred doctrine, the notion of light in some form uses quite often and in different senses, in different words. We are talking about strike, fire, electricity, warmth, aura, magnetism, etc., etc. That's why, being a physicist, I would like to know, first of all, what does science know about the light and its nature? So I will start with a little excursion into this. And after that, after we sum up what we know today about it, I will try to connect it with philosophical notions, and then we will go to the sphere of my assumptions, some of my ideas. I created a scheme which is important for me as for scientist, physicist, theorist. Today, from Einstein era, who tried to create the single theory of field, and he tried to analyze all four types of connections known for today. He tried to connect them in geometric way. His theory of relativity is different in its quality from other four types of connection. We're talking about strong or weak connection. They are fields in space and time. If we're talking about gravitation, it is not a field. It is topology of the space and time. The mass changes the space and time curve, and all the physical bodies follow these rails, the geodesical. For example, the light doesn't have a mass. Very often in the internet you may find questions, how does sun attract it? It doesn't. It follows a geodesic itinerary, and this is how it is explained. Einstein didn't achieve create this concept. Then there was a contrary concept when they tried to connect the gravitation and the field, the quantum theory, for example, but it doesn't comply with the global theory of relativity. Thus, now, today, all science is in suspended mood, and I think the Theosophy gives some kind of breakthrough, and I would like to talk about this during my presentation. As I've mentioned before, the notion, the concept of light permeates the whole philosophical principles. We see the different ways to call the light and the sacred doctrine. The scientific concept of light started with the great Newton, who touched everything in his studies, science, and his hypothesis, his idea was the first one that the light is presented as corpuscles, the corpuscular theory, which move in the space. Together with Newton, there was a wave theory of light by Huygens at the end of 17th, the beginning of 18th century. Yet the Newton authority was that great that his corpuscular theory was the main and the basic for all science. So the second hypothesis was suggested by Descartes' Huygens, and here we see that if light is a wave, there should be some vibrations of the medium, and then the notion of ether appeared. What creates the waves? The struggle, the fight between the ideas of Huygens and Newton continued during the whole 18th century till the 19th century, and then we see the French scientist JeanFrance, who suggested his work in 1820, where he introduces all the optic ideas and he developed the theory of light and wave diffraction. His theory was paradoxal because, according to his theory, if in the way of light we put not translucent round disk, there should be a light spot in the center. Yet, if you introduce a round shape, there should be the dark spot in the middle. It didn't sound like logical, but after the practical experiments, the scientists saw that he was right, and all the 19th century was enlightened by this idea that light is a wave. In the second part of the 19th century, Maxwell created the classical theory of electromagnetism. He created his formula equation where he used the idea of ether as well. He imagined the fluctuations, vibrations of the ether. He understood that the light is electromagnetic wave. The light is just a small diapason of the electromagnetic wave. Everybody was happy and glad. Finally, we understood the light is electromagnetic wave. Great. Yet, in the end of the 19th century, we had new ideas. For example, the black body and effects that could not be explained using the Maxwell theory. Then we needed the genius of Max Planck, Albert Einstein. We will get to this. I'd like to say that electromagnetic wave, the diapason, the frequency and the length of the waves, practically from 0 till infinity, eternity. The light diapason only gets the very narrow space from 400 till 700 nanometers. This explains why we see in this space human being does. The light emanated from sun has the maximum peak in this diapason spectrum. This is how the life was formed, and this is how we see things. On the left and on the right, we don't see anything. Here you see micro radio waves, you see the X-ray, gamma rays, etc. So we can think that everything is clear. Yet, as I have mentioned, then we have Albert Einstein and Max Planck, who explained the things that electrodynamics could not explain. Max Planck suggested that the light is emanated, and Einstein saw that it is absorbed, not like emitted, but absorbed. So the impulse is proportional to the length of the wave. You see, on the left we see characteristics of the particles, and on the right we have the characteristics of the wave. The constant Planck connects these two opposite things as one. At the beginning of the 20th century, there was a big discussion: what is the light? What are the elementary particles? Because the basic particles reveal this corpuscular and wave properties. There were a lot of discussions on this. I would also like to draw your attention to the light. Where is the difference with the matter in our world? It's very important to understand that the light is basically the limit, the border between the world before and beyond light. The world of tachyons or beyond light is the world of virtual particles. I told a bit about it during our third congress. I will continue my speech. What is the difference of the light from these particles? Before light world has a mass, beyond world light has a mass, yet the world doesn't have mass because the photons doesn't have weight. The speed of light does not depend on the emitter. I would say that light is an alien in our world. It doesn't comply to the laws of this world. You know that we have weight, and weight matters always has a property of inertia. Yet the light's speed does not depend on it. The light is some kind of a transitory sphere between the worlds where the bodies, the objects have weight. Mass. Very important to understand the source of electromagnetic waves. Where does it come from? I found three sources. The first is the electric charge acceleration from the classical electrodynamics by Maxwell. It follows that the body which has the electromagnetic charge emits electromagnetic waves. If the body moves if it moves, if it doesn't move, or if it moves in a linear way, it doesn't emanate anything. Only with acceleration, it has a charge. Then photons are emitted while having reactions from gamma quanta while passing between different orbits. Then we're talking about protons, which is the next process. Gamma quanta occur when a particle, an antiparticle, such as an electron position, are annihilated. This annihilation is the third situation. While annihilated, the gamma quanta occurs. These processes are quite known in the science. Now we're approaching the notion of what is the wave-particle dualism of the nature of light. Here, where the physics faced theosophy. We were talking that we thought that light is a corpuscle, then we thought it is wave, and we found out it was not corpuscle, it was not wave. Light is not wave nor particle. It manifests during the experiment or wave or particle properties. It's a centaurus which cannot be defined with these notions. You see, if we take nitrogen and oxygen in certain properties, certain quantities, we can have water. If we take them separately, they're just two kinds of gases. And it's the same about light. We cannot still understand it completely. We do not have a deep total understanding of this fact. I would also like to talk about the word ether as a medium in which light propagates. It was suggested by René Descartes in the 17th century. Then it was developed in the 19th century by Maxwell and his ether theory. Then Einstein told the ether is not needed because for electromagnetic wave, it can expand in the vacuum. The Maxwell equation are written the way that the magnetic field are born, and there is a creation of electromagnetic waves and the creation of the movement between them. Then we don't need the theory of relativity. The ether was not needed. I'd like to say
Dmitry Ivanovich Mendeleev, the great chemist, was occupied with this theory, and in 1905 he published his work, several works actually, for age of what he could acquire the Nobel Prize, and here he proposes the particle of ether, Newtonium, the zero group and the zero rho in his table, Newtoni. And he thought that this particle is million times smaller than the hydrogen atom. And as I said, in order to distribute electromagnetic waves, there was no need in either. Then they forgot about it, and this zero rho was eliminated from the periodic table. We sometimes say that Mr. Mendeleev was mistaken, but these are great persons, and great persons do not make mistakes. I think that we'll get back to it after some decades, and probably in this century. We proceed to a very important notion, physical vacuum, that has replaced the world ether. The notion of the physical vacuum is a great part of the 20th century. People understood it under fundamental works of Paul Dirac, of his great equation to relativist electron, and further was elaborated by many scientists, including Richard Feynman. Physicists realized that the physical vacuum is not emptiness. It is something giving birth to all substances of our world and defining all physical characteristics of this world. If we look on solid physical objects, a vacuum in them occupies much more space than particles. Decay tens of times less than solid particles. In liquids, this percentage is even smaller, and in gases even smaller. This figure is 10 in degree minus 3. That is the number of particles that are in the vacuum. And Dirac started by the fact that there are electron and positron pairs in atom that can enter our world. And right now we know that there is an infinite number of these classes of particles, and they make this interaction possible. We can say that everything comes out of vacuum. It's such an interesting concept that is the main right now in the quantum theory of field. An interesting phrase I mentioned from in a vacuum enclosed in the volume of an ordinary electric light bulb, there is so much energy that it would be enough to boil all oceans of the world. Here, that is my slide, the hypothesis of a new light-bearing medium. I do not exclude such a possibility that in the future physicists will understand that the physics, vacuum, and the world either are can merge together in one notion. Probably this notion is actually Akasha, and we'll get back to it a bit later. So, the fact is that light now one dimension because time is one-dimensional. As I mentioned in last Congress of the nature of time, time can actually have much more dimensions, and energy is alive with many dimensions. But here, of course, I can tell about only one dimension of energy, this scale of energies. So, have a look, please. At this scale of energy, there is the divine light. Its energy is infinite. It's a transcendent notion. Below, I have drawn optical photons, 1 electron volt of energy. That is our vision of photons. That is energy we perceive easily. If energy is higher, we get to the hundreds and thousands times, and it's great, which is dangerous for people. If it's millions of times high, it's gamma rays that emerge when trans-uranium elements get divided. For example, when the atomic bomb is exploded, and it's so dangerous because the ray disease is there. We register the highest energies of 100 billion electron per volt. And we can introduce a notion of Planck gamma quantums related to Planck time, 10 in degree minus 3 second. These are several trillions of electrons per minute. What do I mean by that? By getting up to the divine light, we get the idea of gamma quantums energy increased, and of course our bodies cannot perceive it at the physical plane. So when we get to the higher worlds going away from our physical plane, then our bodies should be capable of bearing the level of this light. So when there are angels in the cinema who come to our plane, to the earth, in the aura of light, people cannot bear this light, and that's correct because they're on other level of frequencies. So I could propose you the following scheme. As I've already said, the light occupies a particular position here. It's something between worlds or planes. So we have the divine light above. 2 or 3 planes are those that we do not know anything about because it's unknowable. Starting from the 4th plane, the light is in the the form of Fahad. That is the only source of energy and forces, all forces that will be manifested further in lower planes. Fahad sometimes is depicted as a snake, and I've drawn it like that because there are many manifestations of Fahad. And lower Fahad is implemented in the light of Akasha. There are quantums, quanta of Akasha, a quanta. So important it is. And a quanta of the Akasha field can be born, can give birth to new particles. Even in the 20th century, a theory of researchers who predicted the process of how the substance is born by gamma quantums giving birth to positrons and other particles. And this experiment has recently been confirmed. So light can give birth to substance. It's so important. At Akasha plane already, Fahad is manifested in Akasha. It gives birth to Theo particles, as I called it, particles of the God. And here are the quanta. And they have an enormous quantity of energy in them. I drew this moving picture. I just mentioned to text about Akasha that it's a primary substance, the source of life, which being manifested at lower planes gives all material forms, and not only for matter, but also for consciousness. And finally, such a scheme I can draw your attention to. There is a certain divine light, and only from the first plane of prototypes, the fourth plane, our world is where this light is implemented through Fahad. The fifth plane of implementation of plane of mind and creativity, where it's manas, and then at lower planes, it's the material plane, karma, and the physical plane. I've drawn this light as something between planes or worlds. At the physical plane, there are 4 types of interaction. There have been recent experiments saying that there is actually the 5th force that does exist, but it's under question right now. And these 4 interactions are right now, as I've mentioned, unfortunately not united. We cannot unite it in one. Our common is at Akasha plane. This united element, and Fahad is implemented through Akasha here. Most likely, this united field is actually implemented, and at the Akasha plane, space can emerge. As I've noted, in the general theory of relativity, it's mentioned that matter creates curve or makes time and space have particular characteristics, gives them topology. But according to Einstein, matter creates space. The space is already there initially. It's possible that at Akasha plane, Fahad creates, in particular, the space. That is what I suggest. And on the basis of that information, I think that and hope that physicists can move forward and study what we have around us. Thank you. Mr. Roshchupkin, thank you so much for such a scale, for such material given to us, and we'll try to get to it into more detail more than once. It means one of the main theosophical principles I mean the sources of light manifestation, your fragments, and your precise way of introducing information. I think it's one of breakthroughs in this research. And thank you so much for this source of light. I'd like to introduce several ideas. Idea is the following: when the light emerges, it is an immediate structure of space as polarity is changed, as opposite states are changed. And as soon as this change happens, there is pressure, there is light, and it's actually light, it's movement, the way it breaks. And in this state, solidity of matter and of space does not affect it, and it is light. When you speak of Akasha as a source and of Akasha light, these are different planes. Akasha plane, and it's a lower part of ether. As the state changes, we'll call it black and white or black, for example, causes this pressure, and it is how light is manifested at the lower plane. The idea is that the light is actually pressure, not affected by any solidity, because a curve of matter movement that you talk about, it's how we can correlate it with light curve. The way light it moves, there is no such curve. So that is the thought I have. Unfortunately, I cannot say anything about that as I listen. These thoughts, I have two trends that fight inside. First of all, there is a physicist inside me who says that, like, I don't know what it is, but still there is a theosophist inside who says that we should think on that. Let us think on that. We have our round table that will soon start its work. Thank you so much, Sergei Pavlovich Roshchupkin, professor of Polytechnical University, St. Petersburg, Russia. Applause from all delegates and participants of the Congress to you.